Chapter 19 of Ruth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Cynthia Lyons. Ruth by Elizabeth Cleghorn Gaskell. Chapter 19. After 5 years. The quiet days grew into weeks and months, and even years, without any event to startle the little circle into the consciousness of the lapse of time. One who had known them at the date of Ruth's becoming a governess in Mr. Bradshaw's family, and had been absent until the time of which I am now going to tell you, would have noted some changes which had imperceptibly come over all. But he too would have thought that the life which had brought so little of turmoil and vicissitude must have been calm and tranquil, and in accordance with the bygone activity of the town in which their existence passed away. The alterations that he would have perceived were those caused by the natural progress of time. The Benson home was brightened into vividness by the presence of the little Leonard, now a noble boy of 6, large and grand in limb and stature, and with a face of marked beauty and intelligence. Indeed, he might have been considered by many as too intelligent for his years, and often the living with old and thoughtful people gave him, beyond most children, the appearance of pondering over the mysteries which meet the young on the threshold of life, but which fade away as advancing years bring us more into contact with the practical and tangible, fade away and vanish, until it seems to require the agitation of some great storm of the soul before we can again realize spiritual things. But at times Leonard seemed oppressed and bewildered, after listening intent, with grave and wondering eyes, to the conversation around him. At others, the bright animal life shone forth radiant, and no 3 months' kitten, no foal, suddenly tossing up its heels by the side of its sedate dam, and careering around the pasture in pure mad enjoyment, no young creature of any kind could show more merriment and gladness of heart. For ever in mischief was Sally's account of him at such times, but it was not intentional mischief, and Sally herself would have been the first to scold any one else who had used the same words in reference to her darling. Indeed, she was once nearly giving warning because she thought the boy was being ill-used. The occasion was this. Leonard had for some time shown a strange, odd disregard of truth. He invented stories, and told them with so grave a face, that unless there was some internal evidence of their incorrectness, such as describing a cow with a bonnet on, he was generally believed, and his statements, which were given with the full appearance of relating a real occurrence, had once or twice led to awkward results. All the three, whose hearts were pained by this apparent unconsciousness of the difference between truth and falsehood, were unaccustomed to children, or they would have recognised this as a stage through which most infants, who would have lively imaginations, pass; and accordingly there was a consultation in Mr Benson's study one morning. Ruth was there, quiet, very pale, and with compressed lips, sick at heart as she heard Miss Benson's arguments for the necessity of whipping, in order to cure Leonard of his story-telling. Mr Benson looked happy and uncomfortable. Education was but a series of experiments to them all, and they all had a secret dread of spoiling the noble boy, who was the darling of their hearts. And, perhaps, this very intensity of love begot an impatient, unnecessary anxiety, and made them resolve on sterner measures than the parent of a large family, where love was more spread abroad, would have dared to use. At any rate, the vote for whipping carried the day, and even Ruth, trembling and cold, agreed that it must be done. Only she asked, in a meek, sad voice, if she need be present. Mr Benson was to be the executioner, the scene the study, and being instantly told that she had better not, she went slowly and languidly up to her room, and kneeling down, she closed her ears and prayed. Miss Benson, having carried her point, was very sorry for the child, and would have begged him off, but Mr Benson had listened more to her arguments than now to her pleadings, and only answered, "If it is right, it shall be done." He went into the garden, and deliberately, almost as if he wished to gain time, chose and cut off a little switch from the laburnum tree. Then he returned through the kitchen, and gravely taking the awed and wondering little fellow by the hand, he led him silently into the study, and placing him before him, began an admonition on the importance of truthfulness, meaning to conclude with what he believed to be the moral of all punishment. "As you cannot remember this of yourself, I must give you a little pain to make you remember it. I am sorry it is necessary, and that you cannot recollect without my doing so." But before he had reached this very proper and desirable conclusion, and while he was yet working his way, his heart ached with the terrified look of the child at the solemnly sad face and words of upbraiding. Sally burst in. "And what may ye be going to do with that fine switch I saw ye gathering, Master Thurstan?" asked she, her eyes gleaming with anger at the answer she knew must come, if answer she had at all. "Go away, Sally," said Mr Benson, annoyed at the fresh difficulty in his path. "I'll not stir never a step till you give me that switch as you've got for some mischief, I'll be bound." "Sally, remember where it is said, 'He that spareth the rod spoileth the child,'" said Mr Benson, austerely. "Aye, I remember, and I remember a bit more than you want me to remember, I reckon. It were King Solomon as spoke them words, and it were King Solomon's son that were King Rehoboam, and no great shakes either. I can remember what is said on him, 2 Chronicles 12, chapter 14th verse. And he, that's King Rehoboam, the lad that tasted the rod, did evil, because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. I've not been reading my chapters every night for 50 year to be caught napping by a dissenter, neither," said she, triumphantly. "Come along, Leonard." She stretched out her hand to the child, thinking that she had conquered. But Leonard did not stir. He looked wistfully at Mr Benson. "Come," said she, impatiently. The boy's mouth quivered. "If you want to whip me, uncle, you may do it. I don't much mind." Put in this form, it was impossible to carry out his intentions, and so Mr Benson told the lad he might go, that he would speak to him another time. Leonard went away, more subdued in spirit than if he had been whipped. Sally lingered a moment. She stopped to add, "I think it's for them without sin to throw stones at a poor child, and cut up good laburnum branches to whip him. I only do as my betters do, when I call Leonard's mother Mrs Denbigh." The moment she had said this she was sorry. It was an ungenerous advantage after the enemy had acknowledged himself defeated. Mr Benson dropped his head upon his hands, and bid his face, and sighed deeply. Leonard flew in search of his mother, as in search of a refuge. If he had found her calm, he would have burst into a passion of crying after his agitation. As it was, he came upon her kneeling and sobbing, and he stood quite still. Then he threw his arms round her neck, and said, "Mamma, mamma, I will be good. I make a promise. I will speak true. I make a promise." And he kept his word. Miss Benson